I looked at the board between us, my queen trapped, his knight poised for the final strike. The tournament hall buzzed around us, but all I could hear was the thundering of my heart as Ryan's eyes met mine across the 64 squares. His fingers lingered on the piece, and I knew this game was about to become something else entirely. The way he smiled, slow and knowing, told me he wasn't just thinking about chess anymore. My breath caught as he leaned forward, his voice dropping to a whisper that sent heat coursing through me. "Checkmate," he said, but his gaze never left my lips. Before we dive deeper, take a second to hit that like button and subscribe. It really helps the channel grow, and trust me, you won't want to miss what happens next. The tournament had lasted 3 days, each match more intense than the last. I'd entered as an amateur, a 30-year-old accountant looking for a mental challenge beyond spreadsheets and tax returns. Ryan was different, a seasoned player whose reputation preceded him. When we were paired for the semifinals, I felt that familiar flutter of nerves mixed with something deeper, something I hadn't acknowledged in years. Our first game stretched for hours. Every move was deliberate, calculated, a dance of minds across the checkered battlefield. But it wasn't just strategy flowing between us. Each time he captured one of my pieces, his fingers would brush against mine, lingering just a moment too long. When I countered with a bold queen sacrifice, his sharp intake of breath told me he appreciated more than just my tactical prowess. "Impressive," he murmured after I'd forced a draw in the final moments. Most people wouldn't have seen that combination coming. I gathered my pieces, trying to ignore how his compliment warmed me. "I've always been good at seeing patterns others miss." "I bet you are." His voice carried undertones that had nothing to do with chess, and everything to do with the way he was studying my face like he was memorizing every detail. The second game was even more charged. We sat closer this time, our knees occasionally touching under the small table. Every accidental contact sent sparks up my spine. When he leaned over to point out a particularly elegant move I'd made, his cologne filled my senses, something woodsy and masculine that made my mind wander to places it shouldn't go. "You're full of surprises," he said, his breath warm against my ear. I like that in a woman. Heat bloomed in my chest, spreading lower as his words settled between us. I shifted in my chair, suddenly aware of how the fabric of my dress clung to my thighs, how his gaze followed the movement with undisguised interest. "Ryan," I whispered, not trusting my voice to stay steady. "Yes, we should focus on the game." His smile was slow, predatory. "Who says I'm not?" But I was losing focus fast. Every time he moved a piece, I found myself watching his hands, strong, confident fingers that moved with precision. I wondered what those hands would feel like exploring something other than a chessboard. The thought made my skin flush, and I knew he noticed when his eyes darkened with awareness. By the time he delivered his final checkmate, the air between us was thick with unspoken tension. The tournament hall was nearly empty, most spectators having wandered off to dinner. We sat in the aftermath of our match, neither moving to pack up the pieces. "Good game," I managed, though my mind was anywhere but on chess. "The best I've had in years." His meaning was clear, and it had nothing to do with moves and strategy. "Listen, I know a quiet place where we could analyze the game, talk through some of the more interesting positions." I should have said no, should have remembered the gold band on my finger, the husband waiting for me at home. But something about the way Ryan looked at me, like I was a puzzle he desperately wanted to solve, made rational thought impossible. "Where?" "My hotel room. It's just upstairs." The invitation hung in the air between us, loaded with possibility. Every instinct screamed that this was dangerous territory, but the rational part of my mind had been steadily losing ground all evening. I started, then stopped. What was I doing? But when he stood and extended his hand, I took it without hesitation. The elevator ride to the 8th floor felt eternal. We stood close enough that I could feel the heat radiating from his body, could hear each controlled breath he took. When he pressed the button for his floor, his shoulder brushed against mine, and I had to bite my lip to suppress the soft sound that threatened to escape. "Nervous?" he asked, his voice low and rough. "Should I be?" "That depends on what you want from tonight." The question hung between us as the elevator doors slid open. I followed him down the carpeted hallway, my heart hammering against my ribs. With each step, I was crossing further into territory I'd never explored, moving toward something that would change everything. His room was elegant but simple. A king-sized bed dominated the space, and floor-to-ceiling windows offered a view of the city lights below. Ryan moved to the small table by the window and began setting up a chessboard. "I thought we could review some of your more creative combinations," he said, though his eyes never left my face. I nodded, moving to sit across from him, but as he began arranging the pieces, I found myself studying his profile instead of the board. The The sharp line of his jaw, the concentration in his dark eyes, the way his lips curved slightly when he caught me watching. "See something you like?" he asked without looking up. "I'm just thinking. About chess? Among other things." He finally met my gaze, and the intensity there made my breath catch. What other things? The question was innocent enough, but the way he asked it, low and intimate, made it feel like anything but. I shifted in my chair, suddenly aware of how alone we were, how the rest of the world felt very far away. "I shouldn't be here," I whispered. "But you are. Ryan, tell me to—" "Leave you alone," he said, leaning forward slightly. "Tell me you're not feeling what I'm feeling, and I'll call you a cab right now." The words stuck in my throat, because the truth was, I was feeling it, this pull, this magnetic attraction that had been building all evening. The way he looked at me made me feel alive in a way I hadn't experienced in years. Instead of answering, I reached across the table and moved his king forward one square, a meaningless move in any real game, but here it felt like crossing a line. "Interesting choice," he murmured, his fingers covering mine as they lingered on the piece. The contact sent electricity shooting up my arm, his thumb traced along my knuckles, a feather-light touch that somehow felt more intimate than anything I'd experienced in months. "I don't usually make impulsive decisions," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "Maybe it's time you started." He stood then, moving around the table until he was standing beside my chair. I tilted my head back to look at him, and the hunger in his eyes made heat pool low in my stomach. "Anna," he said my name like a prayer, like something sacred. "If we do this—" "I know. Do you? Because once we cross this line, there's no going back." I stood slowly, closing the distance between us, until I could feel the warmth of his body against mine. Maybe I don't want to go back. That was all the permission he needed. His hands found my face, fingers threading through my hair as he drew me closer. The first brush of his lips against mine was tentative, questioning. But when I melted into him, responding with a hunger that surprised us both, the kiss deepened into something consuming. His mouth moved against mine with practiced skill, drawing soft sounds from my throat that I didn't recognize as my own. Every nerve ending came alive under his touch as his hands traced down my spine, settling at the curve of my waist. "You taste even better than I imagined," he whispered against my lips. "You've been imagining? Since the moment you walked into that tournament hall?" His confession sent a thrill through me. The way you bit your lip when you were concentrating, the little victory smile when you made a good move. I've been thinking about kissing that mouth for 3 days. Heat flooded through me at his words. I'd been so focused on the game, I hadn't realized he'd been studying me just as intently as I'd been studying him. "What else have you been thinking about?" I asked, surprised by my own boldness. His smile was pure sin. "Dangerous question. I like danger. Do you?" His hands slid lower, fingers tracing the hem of my dress. "Because I've been thinking about what you'd look like without this." My breath hitched as his words painted vivid pictures in my mind. I knew I should stop this, should remember all the reasons why this was wrong. But the way he touched me, looked at me, made me feel desired in a way I'd forgotten was possible. "Show me," I whispered. His eyes darkened with desire, and I felt powerful in a way that was intoxicating. With careful hands, he began unfastening the buttons of my dress, each one revealing more skin to his hungry gaze. The fabric whispered as it fell away, pooling at my feet like discarded inhibitions.
"Beautiful," he breathed, his eyes roaming over me with reverent appreciation. So beautiful. I'd never felt more exposed or more alive. The way he looked at me, like I was something precious, something to be savored, made confidence bloom.
In my chest. "Your turn," I said, reaching for the buttons of his shirt. He let me undress him slowly, my fingers exploring the planes of his chest as each piece of clothing disappeared. His skin was warm and firm under my touch, muscles tensing, as I traced patterns across his torso. When we came together again, skin against skin, the sensation was overwhelming. Every point of contact sent sparks through my nervous system, building toward something I'd almost forgotten existed. He guided me toward the bed, his mouth never leaving mine. The crisp hotel sheets were cool against my back as he settled beside me, his hands mapping every curve with patient thoroughness. "I want to learn every inch of you," he murmured against my neck, his lips tracing a path that made me arch beneath him. "Ryan." His name fell from my lips like a confession as his attention moved lower, his mouth finding sensitive spots that made me gasp and clutch at his shoulders. He took his time, building my desire with the same strategic patience he'd shown at the chessboard. Every touch was calculated to drive me higher, to push me toward the edge of control. When I thought I couldn't take any more, he moved above me, his weight settling between my thighs. The first touch of him against me drew a sharp cry from my throat, my body instinctively moving to accommodate him. "Look at me," he commanded softly, and I opened eyes I didn't remember closing. The intensity in his gaze as he joined with me was overwhelming, tender and possessive all at once. The rhythm we found was slow at first, a careful exploration of how we moved together. But as desire built between us, the pace intensified. His hands gripped my hips, guiding me to meet each movement, drawing reactions from me that I'd never experienced before. "That's it," he encouraged, his voice rough with his own need. "Let go for me." And I did. Whatever control I'd been clinging to dissolved as pleasure crashed over me in waves. I cried out his name, my body arching beneath his as sensation overwhelmed every other thought. He followed moments later, his own release drawing deep sounds from his chest as he buried his face against my neck. We lay tangled together afterward, both breathing hard, both trying to process what had just happened between us. "Anna," he said my name quietly, his fingers tracing lazy patterns on my skin. "I know," I whispered back, not trusting myself to say more. We'd crossed a line that couldn't be uncrossed. Whatever happened next, this moment, this perfect, terrible, beautiful moment, would always exist between us. As the reality of what we'd done began to settle in, I felt the first stirrings of panic. What had I done? How could I go home and face my husband after this? But when Ryan pulled me closer, pressing a soft kiss to my temple, those worries faded. For now, in this room, with this man who made me feel more alive than I had in years, nothing else mattered. "Stay," he whispered against my hair. And despite every reason I should leave, despite the guilt that would come with mourning, I found myself nodding. Because some moments are too precious to cut short, even when you know they'll cost you everything. The night stretched ahead of us, full of possibility and danger in equal measure. I'd come here for a chess tournament and found something I hadn't even known I was looking for. Tomorrow would bring consequences. Tonight, there was only this, the weight of his arm around me, the steady rhythm of his breathing, and the knowledge that I'd never be quite the same again. Some moves change everything on the board, and some moments change everything in life. This had been both, and I wasn't sure I regretted either one. As sleep began to claim me, wrapped in Ryan's arms, I wondered what game we'd be playing tomorrow, and whether I was brave enough to see it through to the end. Have you ever found yourself in a moment where desire overrode every logical thought? When the risk felt worth it despite knowing the cost? Tell me in the comments. I read every single one and want to hear your thoughts. Before you go, smash that like button, hit subscribe, and turn on notifications, because things are about to get even more intense. Thanks for being here, and I'll see you in the next story.